So help me out here. I'm not sure if my marriage is over. What should I do?
Well, if you're not sure your marriage is over, don't come and see a lawyer. That's number one. Don't bring the problems into the legal process until you're made a decision that's absolutely right. You've got to be really clear about this. This is a huge decision for you, your spouse, and your children and wider family. This is the big decision. If you're in any doubt at all, go away and think about it. It may be helpful for you to go and see a therapist or a counsellor to talk about your feelings and to see if there's any way around sorting out these problems. What a lot of people find is that actually you're thinking about the symptoms rather than the causes of what's making this relationship feel difficult. And that's the problem. You're thinking about the row you had last night rather than where did it go wrong? What can we do to put it right? In a lot of cases, it's perfectly possible to put it back on track by thinking about some stratagems, thinking about how you can make it work again, rather than just thinking there's only one way out of this and that's divorce. There are lots of things you can do. Also, try thinking about going to relate as a couple. Talking together in an environment which is constructive is really, really helpful. When you're sitting at home having rows around the kitchen table, you tend to get into the same old routines, the same old horrible loops about blaming everybody. That's not going to help sort out the marriage. Getting professional help is. That's really important. It can be helpful to have a single meeting with a solicitor. If you're really thinking about divorce, have a single meeting with a solicitor, because then you will find out how bad it is going to be, what's going to be involved. It will probably involve a reduction in your standard of living. It will involve you in a whole lot of financial stuff. That should be part of your decision making, and that may be worthwhile doing.
But I think I've actually got a legal problem, not a psychological problem.
Well, you've probably got both. But address the psychological problem first. There are two processes going on here. There is the legal process and financial process, but before anybody gets into any law or financial division, there is the emotional and psychological process. That goes on long before anybody instructs a solicitor, and it goes on long afterwards. Now, the real trick, it seems to me, is you stop the emotional process impacting on the legal process and the legal process impacting on the psychological process. So you're right, there are two things happening here, but keep them running in parallel if you can. Sort out the emotional side before you come into the law.
I've decided I do want to get a divorce. Do I need to get a solicitor involved?
Well, not necessarily. There's lots of ways you can sort out a divorce. You will need some legal advice for sure, but actually a lot of people can sort these things out around the kitchen table if they are able to talk, and that's the crucial thing. You will need some legal help just to see if that decision that you've got around the table is fair. You need to see if you've left anything out as well. I mean, it's very easy to forget pensions or some aspect that you really do need to bring into that agreement. There are various ways of sorting more complicated cases out. There is a new process called collaborative law, which I'm a big fan of. Basically, you have a series of meetings called four-way meetings, and in those, both solicitors and both spouses sit around the table and they talk through everything. And you actually agree at the outset that you won't go to court. So it is anchored at the negotiating table. It's a really dignified way of doing it, and you're working for common solutions the whole time. Frankly, you cut a lot of the nonsense out. So there's no letter writing, there's no preparing for court. You just cut to the quick, and it's really effective. Another very good method is mediation. You don't have your solicitor in mediation, but the mediator is there to referee the discussion. It's a bit like the counselling. You're not chasing your tails around the table and just shouting at each other. The mediator is there to make sure that you have a constructive discussion. You bring the agenda, so you say, well, what are we going to do about the kids, or what are we going to do about money? The mediator will help you have a say evenly, each of you, and sort things out. A lot of people still use lawyers, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's more expensive, but sometimes it's very necessary. As a solicitor, I will often negotiate on behalf of a client with another solicitor, but I'll always try and keep the cost down by working out what the real issues are, working out what we need to do to sort those out, and maybe have a round table meeting or a two-room meeting to try and resolve those things. Then there's the courts. The courts should be an absolute last resort. They are very expensive, and you should only go down that route if you have really, really tried everything, and I mean everything else.